you very much, person in the chat. Uh, well, hello recording. We've started, intro's done. And so today we'll be talking about the perfect post-grad pitch. We find that one of the most difficult parts of the job search is communicating what you do, how you do it, and the value you provide companies immediately after graduation. So I'm curious to just hear from some of the folks in the room today. The brave ones of you, I'll see who it is. Unmute and just introduce yourself and let me know one thing that you're interested in hearing about today, something that's on your mind in regards to careers and the job search.
Hi, my name is Alejandro, and I kind of want to hear about the expectations on not only getting to that first job, but also that first job and before you move on to a better second job.
Absolutely. Yeah, expectation setting is one of the biggest pieces of job search. Really setting expectations for yourself of what you should do every day and how much you can accomplish, as well as expectations for how people are going to respond to us when we're out in the job search. You know, every day I'll have someone reach out to me and say, I've been ghosted. They haven't gotten back to me in 3 days. And I'm like, whoa, hey, pump the brakes. That's not ghosting. So there's a lot of different things that we can talk about when it comes to expectations. So as we go through, definitely chime in. Let me know questions that pop up as we hit different topics. But generally, when it comes to the job search, we want to expect for the average. So expect 6 months, which is the average amount of time it takes to get a job. Expect that people won't respond to you. Expect that you'll get a lot of rejections and be ready for those rejections. Be ready to recontextualize those as they come through into whatever will motivate you rather than demotivate you. And really at the end of the day, you know, companies are comprised of a bunch of people who are running around with their hair on fire trying to get things done, and that's why they need help. And if we're expecting them to be buttoned up and having every, you know, T crossed and I dotted, we're probably giving them too much credit. So the more patient we can be, the more empathetic we can be, and the more we can think, how can I help these folks make better decisions, the better off we'll be. So just a few things to set the stage, but we can definitely get into it more as we go through the presentation. Any other folks want to, you know, share what you're most curious about when it comes to the job search?
Hi, my name is Patrick. I think in addition to basically how much we should and how to sell kind of our past experience with what we've learned at Coding Temple, and then after that, to give a full picture of what we can bring to a new company, even from things that may have been fully or somewhat unrelated kind of in our past professional life. What to do with that experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I always like to think about it as a merging and an evolution. So what did I learn from this last role that helped me make the decision to do what I'm doing now? And that's a big thing because normally we get so hyper focused on the negative. This is why I left. This is what wasn't good. And we use that as motivation, right? We go, oh, I really hated my old boss, so I'm really going to work hard to get into this new field, right? But once we're at the point where we're trying to get into the new field, we don't want to bring that negativity into interviews and ruin the tone of an interview. So what we want to do is say, here's what I liked. We have to like go back to when we first started that old job. Here's what I liked about that job. Here's what I wasn't getting to do as much of that I wanted to. And here's what I learned about myself that had me make this transition. So I'll give you a template of how to actually talk about that and how to answer that question of tell me about yourself, which is, you know, the most common thing that'll come up. So I appreciate you asking. We'll do one more question. Anyone else have a job search topic?
I have like an addition to Pat's as well. Also, how to sell our soft skills as well.
Yeah.
Because I mean, the technical skills, you know, you showed that in a technical test or whatever they give you, but you know, just getting out there and selling yourself without sounding too braggy in a way.
For sure. And there's probably going to be, when it comes to bragging, this is something I'm pretty terrible at too. It's, in the marketing world, so many people are making such outrageous claims that I tend to be a little hesitant to say much of anything. But there is a level at which we're probably being too humble, and we need to own a little bit more of what we've done, and maybe reframe things that we've done to see the full picture. A lot of times we just haven't sat down with the idea long enough to see all the intricacies and be like, oh wait, I actually did do a lot on that project, right? Sometimes we're in such go mode we forget all the good stuff we're doing. Um, and then when it comes to, sorry, can you restate the other part of your question? I just want to make sure I hit the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, they test our technical skills, but
Right.
when it comes to
Soft skills.
soft skills, how do we show the interviewer, because it's not like a technical test that you can just show, you know, through an exam or a test.
Exactly. So with soft skills, the key here is to show, not tell. So what we want to do, or what we see a lot in interviews, is when someone says, "Oh, I'm a hard worker," or "I love to solve problems," or "I'm really collaborative." And those words seem like we're showcasing our soft skills, but it doesn't really land on the ears the way that we think it does, right? Because they just start questioning, okay, well, how do you collaborate? Um, what's an example of your hard work, right? What are the times that you've persevered, etc. So when we say these things, we either need to back them up with stories, or even better, tell stories that infer that information so that they make the connections in their head, right? If I tell a story, let's say they ask a question like, tell me about a time you showed leadership. If I tell a story of how I showed leadership on a team, in that story, rather than being really high level about, well, I worked on a project and I led it and I completed it and it was great, actually getting into the details. I managed these three people. Each had their own communication style. Here's how I was able to change the way that I was working with each person, right? Or I was on a team and it had these different personalities. And here's how I communicated differently with each person in order to get the outcome, right? Now you're showcasing your communication styles, you're showcasing your collaborative abilities, you're showcasing and you're telling stories. So the way to get those soft skills into the conversation is to show them through storytelling rather than just saying the words. The words are kind of empty, right? If I tell you I'm a really great guy, immediately a red flag goes up and goes, why is this person saying this to me? what what are they hiding, right? Or I'm so generous. You're like, this person's probably not generous, right? So we don't want to just state the word because it doesn't hit as strong. What we want to do is showcase it through stories. So we'll definitely get into that in our conversation today. All right. Well, I'm really excited to pull up our presentation here. But again, this is a very much a conversational presentation. So jump in anytime, ask questions, interrupt me. I'm all about making this as relevant to you as possible. All right. Here we go. You can all see my screen? Yeah, cool. So again, my name is Martin McGovern. With my company Career Therapy, I've worked with all sorts of different schools and boot camps from every kind of background, but mainly tech, coding, sales, cybersecurity, UX, things like that. And so, I'm really focused on helping people, not just with the tactical promotional sides of things, but also that emotional side. I think, we kind of know the tactics. They're all on the internet. They're all out there. You can go to YouTube and find anything you want these days. But it's when you hit those moments where you're like, I'm about to explode at someone, or I'm about to freak out, or I'm like really down. That's what coaches are really great for in order to help with that side of things and, be someone to vent to and things like that. So I really love kind of walking that line between the promotional world and the emotional world. And so today we're going to be digging into three different things. The first one is the words that you use. Second one is the stories that you tell. And then we're going to end by helping you craft a pitch. And I've got a template that we'll use for you to actually write it and test it out on our call today. All right. So I hope you've got your mind open and you're ready to think about your past and reframe some of your stories. So let's start with the words. So who do you think you're actually going to be interacting with during your job search? Who are you going to be talking to?
Recruiters, hiring managers, possible team members, people either be above us or below us if we get to later stages of interview runs.
That was a perfect rundown. I love it. So yeah, we're going to be talking to recruiters, hiring managers, literally in the order that you just said. And the key thing here is that each person has a different set of needs, right? If you look at any company's marketing and approach to marketing, it's incredibly tailored, right? You're not going to sell hiking boots to a runner, and you're not going to sell running shoes to a hiker, right? You need to know who you're talking to in order for the message to resonate. Now, thankfully, it's not as stark of a contrast as hikers and runners, right? But in the job search, if you're talking to a recruiter, you need to know what their incentives are. You need to know what they're thinking about, and you need to tailor what you're saying to that perspective. And the same thing with hiring managers or a CEO or a coworker, or when you're networking. How do you change your tune when you're networking? So these are all the different things that we want to be keeping in mind, because the job search is very much a social activity. It seems very isolated, right? And it feels that way a lot of the time because we're behind a computer and we're looking at job boards. But that really is the least effective way to find jobs. The most effective way is to go out and talk to real people. That's where 80% of jobs are found, is through networking and connections. And so that's what we really want to be figuring out is, okay, who do I need to talk to? How can I talk to them? What should I say when I'm in that room? And how do I talk about myself in relation to that person? So what do you think we should be saying? What do you think they care about when they're talking to us?
Oftentimes they have an immediate need to fill. So
An
they
need?
may be focused on project that they have coming, a person that they have who left or took maternity or something.
Exactly, right? So there is a problem that they're trying to solve, right? So if we go into an interview and we say, hi, I'm really excited to learn about how this role will help me learn. They're going to go learn on your own time. We've got a problem to solve, right? So we want to make sure we're speaking the same language. Now, any company that hires you also wants you to learn, because the more you learn, the more problems you'll solve. So there is a feedback loop once you're in the role. But in order to get in that role, you need to sell yourself in the way that they need to hear it. So that's the shift from me first to them first in the job search. Almost everyone who's out there looking for a job right now is being fed a steady stream of information that says, you need to figure out your passion. You need to, advocate for yourself. You need to get this and you need to figure out that. And it's so hyper focused on us. And I think that's one of the reasons why the job search becomes so stressful, is because it's not about just having skills and solving a need. It's about figuring out your grand purpose in the universe, right? That is a perfectly fine thing to explore when you have time and you have sanity to do so. And I very much enjoy those topics. But when it comes down to the bottom line, companies are primarily concerned with, do you understand my problem? Can you solve it with the skills you have? And do you care about what my business does to some degree, or what this industry does to some degree, so that I won't have a high turnover rate if I hire you, right? So we really need to switch from that me first to that them first perspective. And a great example of this is just take a look at your cover letter. Almost every cover letter that I review starts with my name is, and then every single sentence from there on starts with I. So if everything you're saying is me, I, you're probably coming from a me first perspective, and then we can just flip that around, right? Instead of saying, I want a job where I can do these things, we can say, your company is doing these cool things, and I'm really excited to bring value to the team. And that's putting yourself in relation to them. Any questions on this shift in perspective, or has anyone seen this firsthand in your work or your hiring?
You mentioned how do we solve their problem, right?
Yep.
What is their best way to find that problem?
Well,
To what is the best, yeah, like to figure out which is that problem that we have to fix.
there's a lot of different ways that we can do it. One way in particular, the easiest way, is to Google, what problems do web developers solve? And typically it's bugs on the website, conversion issues, traffic issues, customer experience issues, right? Just go through the list of things that you typically would fix in a job and think about how that impacts the business's bottom line, right? If a clear example of this is if you take a website that has 10 clicks to purchase and you get it down to 5 clicks per purchase, you will sell more items, right? And that is something that, a restructure of someone's website can help do. And that is a value add to the business because it increases their number of sales, it increases their customer base, and you can really start to build a loyal following off of that, right? So that's what we want to be figuring out. And then when you're in person, what you want to be thinking about is, what questions can I be asking them that are focused on growth, that are focused on performance, that are focused on the goals that they have. So let's say they say, tell me what questions do you have for me, right? You're at the end of the interview. What questions do you have for me? A lot of times people say, what's the culture like at your company, right? Seems like a good question. But here's what they hear, right? They hear this person only cares about the things that relate to them, even if it's subconscious, right? Because truthfully, before you have the offer, culture is secondary. Up until the point that we get the offer, this company and this job should be the thing that we want. Then once we get the offer, we can go, wait a second, do I actually want this? And we can be more hypercritical there and think back, were my experiences with this company good? You'll infer the culture from the people that you talk to, right? Because if you're in an interview and you ask about culture, what are they always going to say? The culture here is great. We all love each other because I work here and I'm currently on a call trying to sell you on this company, right? No one's going to be brutally blunt and honest with you in the interview about what the culture is like. Oh, we have to work crazy hours. No one's going to say that in an interview. So what do we want to ask instead? We want to say them first questions like, what technologies do you think are going to impact this role in the future? Because that shows that you're thinking ahead about how to stay on top of trends. What are the performance metrics for this role? And how often will I be assessed on my performance? That shows that you care about doing well in the role, right? What are some of the, short-term and long-term goals of this department? And how does this role fit into those goals, right? Now you're asking questions that are about their goals and their performance, and you can really help sort of showcase that your values are in alignment with their values. Does that make sense? Probably the best way you can find out these things. So I said you could Google a little bit and you can ask about it in the interview, but networking is the key thing. If you're having one-on-one conversations with people about their company and about their job, first of all, you'll get much more honest answers. But second of all, you can ask them what they're excited about, what they're working on, what they're struggling with. And that struggling with question really opens up a can of worms. I like to get people to complain about their job because then they'll tell me everything that they struggle with. And then when you're in the interview, you'll be like, I've talked to a lot of, developers and they tend to struggle with this, this, and this. How do you feel this role could really impact those problems? And they're like, holy cow, this person knows so much about the role already, right? So that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to figure out. We use networking as research for the interview. So there's benefits to networking even beyond getting referrals. So what are we currently saying? How are you currently describing your education and your experience so far? If I were to say, tell me about yourself, what do you think we're currently saying? How would you describe that answer as of today?
Um, so it's probably if you're asking me to talk about myself in a professional way, I mean,
Yep.
I would probably give you a little bit of my background and end with what I want, where I want to end up.
So if I were to say, tell me about, what you're up to right now, what would you tell me? How would you say it?
Probably the projects that I'm working on right now.
Cool. I like that approach. Anyone else have thoughts on how you might answer it?
Probably similarly. Yeah, just projects that we're working on.
I like that. Yeah. So typically what I hear from folks is, hi, I recently graduated and I'm excited for the opportunity to learn in this role. Now, if you're going to talk about your projects, I think that that's an incredible step forward from what I typically hear from folks. So good on you for actually thinking about the examples, right? Giving stories, telling stories, giving examples. This is typically what I hear from folks, though, is that I recently graduated and I'm excited for the opportunity to learn in this role. What are your thoughts on this answer? What's good about it? What's bad about it?
If I was a hiring manager, what I hear is that this is gonna cost me some money to teach this person, money and time to teach this person to get to where they're supposed to be for that role.
You're spot on. Because here's what they hear. Hi, I'm inexperienced, unemployed, and need you to teach me. Right? So if we say, I've recently graduated and I'm excited to learn in this role, what they hear is I'm inexperienced, unemployed, and I need you to teach me. So we definitely don't want to go this route with things. We want to be a little bit more project focused in the way that you guys have been describing it. So here's what they really want to hear. This is a concept from marketing called WIFM. What's in it for me, right? So what is in it for them? What is the ROI of the work you do? Does anyone have a thought on what the ROI of a developer is to a company? Why do companies hire developers and what return on investment do they get?
If they're good, they'll make it easier for them to make money selling the actual product that they're selling. Like no one's selling developer hours, basically.
Or showcasing that product as well.
Selling, showcasing, what else? Like get specific. What are all the different ways that you can help the business's bottom line?
Attracting new customers with like a good website.
Perfect. Customer experience.
Making it easy for them to make purchases. Yeah, making it easy for them to make purchases.
Yep. So that's like checkout process, ease of checkout. Angel, anyone else have ideas? It's all right. I'll put you on the spot, but I won't push you too hard. All right. So what we need to be saying instead is, hi, I hear you have big goals for your business. Here's how I can help you solve your problems and grow. Now, this is very general, right? But it's generally in the right direction. We want to be saying, I understand your company is trying to grow, is trying to maintain their state of, growth, get new customers, get more sales, get whatever the thing is that the company needs to get to be sustainable. So if we go to companies and we switch our perspective here, if we switch our pitch from, I want to be doing this kind of work, please hire me, to I'm excited about the goals your company has, I can't wait to be a part of the team and help you achieve those goals, completely changes the way the conversation goes. All right. What questions do you have on this first section?
So I think the big question that I've got right now is, I imagine that probably many of us in this class are already feeling, not even like we have imposter syndrome, but like we're imposters of imposters,
Yeah.
like having just come out of boot camp. But how do we like, so these are all great ways to pitch it, but how do we sell the experience that we've got working on like personal projects and coding boot camp, like tutorials and in-class projects, and transfer that level of experience into the higher level work that we'd be expected to do once placed at a company?
Absolutely. And there's a number of different things that we can do to tackle imposter syndrome. So there's the mentality piece. The mentality piece is I just graduated, I don't have experience, everything I've done is just a project, et cetera, et cetera. The first thing is going to a boot camp is experience, right? So we need to give ourselves credit for the work we've done. Projects aren't that much different than real work. Real work is just projects that someone has a budget for, right? So it's pretty much all the same thing. It's just a matter of in our heads, we're putting things on pedestals, right? So there's a general mentality of like not giving ourselves enough credit. And I find that that's somewhat hard to overcome if we're feeling insecure. So I try to go the opposite way with it too, which is most people aren't great at their job. And most companies are hot messes. So any company that hires you seems like they have their shit together. But chances are, once you get in there, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be working with some a-holes, and you're not going to love it after 3 or 4 years. You're going to want to move on, or you're going to plateau, or something is going to happen that's not ideal, right? You know, every once in a while that doesn't happen and you stay there 10 years. Wonderful. I'm not against that. But even the people I know that have been at a company for 10 years reached out to me at some point in a state of panic going, what am I doing with my life? I need to get out of here, before going, actually, no, it's all right. You know? So none of these
I was
companies.
at a place for 11 and I did that a couple times too along the way too.
Exactly. Like one of my friends who we both interviewed for the same job in college and both got it, just at different, we were a year apart. She's still at the company, but she's had that moment where she reached out to me and was like, oh my God, you quit a few years ago. What happened? How did it go? Like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but she's there still and she's having a great time. So like, we got to stop looking at these companies and these jobs as though they are like lifeboats on the Titanic. All right. They're not. They are rickety lifeboats at best. All right. So when we're talking to people, like how many people have taken a job, gotten in there, you thought it was going to be amazing, and then you realize like, oh, my manager doesn't know what the hell they're doing. Anyone had that experience? I remember when I broke into advertising for the first time, I sat down and I was like, all right, so here's Instagram and YouTube and all these different things. And the whole creative team was like, yeah, we do mostly print. And I was like, what? Like my head exploded, right? So like these things are consistently, once you're in a place, and I don't even care where you're at in your career. I work with 60-year-olds, I work with 20-year-olds. Everyone has imposter syndrome to some degree, or at least anyone who's working with a career coach has imposter syndrome to some degree, which is really most people. And so I try to give myself more credit than I feel I deserve, which is very hard to do, but I give myself a little more credit than I think I deserve. And then I try to bring down, you know, this picture perfect LinkedIn reality to the real world a little bit, and just remind myself every single day that, well, the company isn't responding to me, not because they hate me, but because they don't have their act together, right? You know, these things are mostly in our head. They're just insecure thoughts. And if we can identify them as insecure thoughts and move on to the next thought, then we can actually handle them a little bit better. And so this is really the equation at the end of the day. What problems do they have? And what skills do I have? And if you can find enough that overlap, we're in a good spot. And really what is enough? 60% of what's on the job description. If you've got 60% of what's on the job description, go for it. Because these companies, again, don't know what they need. So they are throwing everything and anything into that job description, probably Frankensteining it from 10 other places. And it's not accurate to what the job's going to be. Has anyone on this call taken a job somewhere, been promised that it was going to be a certain kind of job, and then once you got in there, it was they just changed your position? They were like, actually, we don't really need that anymore. We're going to put you on something completely different. Has that happened to anyone?
Happened a couple times.
There you go. Right?
They hired one job. They hired someone for exactly the same job. We were both MBA grads, and it was like just total clusterfuck. But the HR program funded the entire salary for the first year because it was out of an MBA program. So there were perverse incentives for the departments. So
There we go. See, companies don't have their act together. So to think that they do and to stress ourselves out about being perfect in relation to them is too tall of an order. So I try to give everyone a little bit more slack while also, putting in the effort. We don't want to not put in the effort. But if companies aren't worried at all about selling you a false bill of goods in the job description, then stress out a little bit less about, oh my gosh, can I put this one software in my skills section? Even if I don't know it 100% forwards and backwards, inside and out, can I put it in there? It's like, do you have experience with it? Yes. Could you get up to speed in 6 weeks? Yes. Then include it. Like that's our level of worry that we should be putting into this, because chances are you're probably not going to use it, use everything in that job description. And that's, again, when we get to the interview, we need to ask those questions. I noticed that you're looking for Python. How much of this job is focused on Python? I notice you're looking for someone who has X, Y, and Z skills. What would be the prioritization of those skills? Which ones should I get started on learning today so I'm ready to go on day one? And if you really don't know something, you can say, I don't know that specifically, but I have experience with these other things and I could totally get up and running on it in 3 to 6 weeks if need be. And I'll get started now so that on day one, we're ready to go, right? That's the level of confidence we want to be talking from. And you know how people say, like, it's okay to say, I don't know. Totally fine to say, I don't know. But you have to follow up the I don't know with, here's how I'm going to figure it out. All right. So that's that problem. If you say you like to solve problems, which every developer I've ever talked to in my life has said, the general vague, I like to solve problems. And then I always say, which problems? If you're going to say you like to solve problems, communicate that in the interview when you hit a roadblock. I don't know that specific technology, but here's how quickly I can get up to speed on it. And then ask more questions. How are you using that on the team? What impact are you hoping to make with it? Are there certain areas of it that I should focus on over others, etc.? And that brings us to our stories. So when it comes to our stories, this is one that can really trip people up, but I want to go back to the original idea here, which is saying high-level words does not communicate the point the way that we think it is, right? If I told you I'm an incredibly empathetic career coach, you're already going, why is this guy saying that, right? But if I just told you a story about a woman who was going through a divorce and was able to open up to me about that during a coaching call because it was impacting her job search financially and mental, with her mental health and all sorts of different things, and we were able to put together a new schedule for her for the job search that was a little bit more realistic because of all the things going on in her life, I don't have to say that I can be empathetic on a phone call. You can infer that on your own, as well as probably a dozen other skills, right? So stories communicate far more than high-level words, right? I'm empathetic and I'm able to adjust on the fly versus I helped a woman through this horrible situation and here's what happened at the end, right? And I'm even giving you the high-level version of that story. So that's what we want to be doing. How do we tell them what we do? We want to communicate with stories. But where do we begin? So how do you tell your story? Anyone, where do you begin your story? Do you begin it today? Do you begin it in preschool? Where do you begin your story?
Wherever it's relevant to what I'm trying to convey.
Oh, I like that answer. It's very all encompassing. Your past paves the way. So we always want to explore how what we did in the past has impacted our current decisions today, right? That's why I tell you when I introduce myself, I started out in marketing and now I reverse engineer that marketing to help you get money back from companies that are so good at getting your money, right? That's a story, right? I used to do this. It informs what I do today. And here's how the two things relate to each other. So to the question of how do I connect my past experience to my current experience, it's all about just thinking about the commonalities between things. Why did you do that one thing in the first place? So for me, I went into marketing because I like behavioral psychology. I want to know why people do what they do. That connects perfectly to career coaching. Maybe not perfectly, but I can make that story fit, right? So for you, what was it that drew you to those previous jobs? What was the thing you enjoyed about them? And then what is going on today that connects? So those are the things that I want us to think about. So talk about what you did and share stories of your projects and so on and so forth. So I'm glad someone called that out earlier. I'll talk about my projects. That's exactly what we want to be doing. So I'd love to maybe get one person on the call here today to just answer the question, tell me about yourself. If you were in an interview and you were asked that question, what would you say? And the expectation is that you're not going to answer perfectly. So don't feel pressure. Ben, William, anyone confident enough? Getting a hardcore head shake there. All right, fair enough.
I can go if nobody wants to.
What was that?
I can go if nobody wants to.
Perfect. All right. So we're in an interview. Tell me about yourself.
I graduated college with a chemistry degree, and I eventually went into a data or an analytical chemistry position in a graduate program. And in my graduate program, I realized that what I really liked to do was using the data as more so than actually running experiments. And I decided maybe it was time for a change, and I decided to do a more data intensive role, which leads me to my current position, a data scientist.
Perfect. That's perfect. I love the way you phrase that, right? I started in chemistry. I moved into something a little bit more technical. I'm continuing to follow that path of more and more technical, right? So my journey has been one where I'm continually trying to find something that's more technical to work on and get deeper into the details. And each phase, the only thing I would call out in there is it was time for a change. It's actually probably fine to say that, but I typically like to say, I realized I wanted to be doing more of X, so I started looking for new roles in this area. And that's what brought me here today. So that's what we really want to be talking about. And then as you tell that story, once we get into the rest of the interview, we'll be talking about, what was an example from your chemistry days that, a story you might be able to tell, or a story you can tell from a previous job, or a story you can tell from your current educational work, or anything like that to really knock these points home. And what I want to focus on is that like thread that connects it. So for me, it's behavioral psychology. For you, it might be, the technical side of things. For other people, it might be like communications or team building or something like that. Everyone's got their own sort of thread. Like a salesperson who turns into A UX researcher really likes to deal with people, right? I like to deal with people in sales, and now I deal with people in research. Same skill set, different jobs completely. You see? And we just look for those through lines. So what actually makes a good story? Does everyone know the, typical story arc? Everyone know what I'm talking about? So the typical story arc really follows a pretty straightforward process, right? And I'll try to open this up so you can see the whole thing. So typically there is an inciting incident, a rising action, a falling action, a climax, a falling action, and a resolution. So if you think about the stories that we tell, we want to talk about the journey, right? So we set up a story. We talk about the problem that needs to be solved. That's the incident. We talk about the rising action, which is our approach to solving the problem, our climax, which is solving the problem, and then our falling action resolution is the outcomes of that problem that we solve, of our approach to solving that problem, right? So whenever you talk about your work, there's a lot of different methods to do this, right? There's the hero's journey, there's the STAR method, there's a ton of different ways to tell your story, but we just want to be keeping in mind the different types of ways that people tell stories, not to become the world's greatest storyteller, but just to help us, maybe ramble a little less, something I'm terrible at. I ramble a ton. But to just keep grounding us and bringing us back to, wait a second, is the story I'm telling being set up appropriately? Or am I just jumping into the middle of it and people can't keep up, right? Did I appropriately set the stage? Did I tell them where I was working, who I was working with? Maybe give the names of some of the people on the team. Maybe make up new names. You're not putting people on blast. I don't know. But really saying, like, have I given them sufficient information to understand what I'm going to be talking about when I get to the technical side of things? And then did I resolve it, or did I just sort of fade out, right? So we don't want to just fade out on a story. It's like, so then we started working together and things, it all worked out. Wait, what worked out? What happened? What was the end? What was the end of that project, right? That's what we want to bring back around. So just some really quick overviews of how to tell those stories. And again, this is how we stop rambling, right? Focusing on a very specific answer for each question is really important. So let's say you're in an interview and you're sitting one-on-one on a Zoom across from another person, and they say, tell me about a time that you showed leadership. You might list off 4 or 5 different things because you're nervous and you're just like, oh, this thing and maybe that thing, and here's another time I showed leadership. Or tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. And you go, well, I don't know, I procrastinate, and also I get really in the details sometimes, and I have a hard time delegating and so on and so forth, right? You're giving too many examples. So what we want to do instead, and I just gave an example of that, right? I gave 2 examples in my answer. What we want to do instead is say, well, here is one project that I worked on. Here was what we were trying to solve. Here was my approach to solving it. Here was the resolution. And here's what I learned. And by doing that, you're continually building trust. You're continually making it easy for the interviewer to understand what's happening. And you're making it easier and easier for them to say, yeah, pass this person to the next round. They seem to have their head on straight when it comes to this work, right? And it helps to give characters, it helps to talk about locations, it helps to think about this in a little bit more of a creative way. Now, if this is overwhelming, keep it really simple. Who, what, where, when, why, right? Who was I working with? What was I working on? Why were we doing it? How did we do it? What was the outcome? And I think the biggest thing to really get across is, what did you learn? So my weaknesses are this. And what I learned from that weakness is that I need to be doing this in my work moving forward. Or I had a conflict with a coworker. The conflict is secondary to what you learned from that conflict, right? Tell me about a leadership position. Tell me about a time you showed leadership. The leadership that the example that you give is actually secondary to the thing you learned from being a leader that time, right? So we always want to be tying it to what did I learn? Because what you learned is what you're bringing into this job. So when we're thinking about our stories, we want to focus around keywords. We don't always have to be chronological with the stories that we tell, right? We don't have to, when we are asked, tell me about yourself, say, I went to school in Arlington Heights at St. Viator. And then I went to DePaul University. And then I went to, like, you don't have to just like walk them through your step-by-step of your entire life. You can be much more hyper-focused with it. Like Alejandro said earlier, get to the point of what they want to hear, right? Understand what they need to hear and get to the point. If Nike sat down with you and they said, our shareholders really want more money, can you buy more shoes? You'd be like, what? No, that's not why I buy shoes, right? So you can't sit down with a company and say, I want to pay my rent, can you give me a job? Even if that's true. We need to talk in their language, and we really need to tell our stories in the way that they will be interested in them. All right. So when do we actually tell these stories? Well, these stories become the basis of your elevator pitch, your LinkedIn summary, your interview answers, and so much more. So really all the time throughout the job search, we're practicing these skills, communication skills, storytelling skills. I'm a massive introvert who used to have panic attacks and I have an anxiety disorder. It's terrible. But over time, you just get better and better and better. I'm sure none of you are sitting there going, wow, this guy probably used to choke up in interviews. I used to choke up in interviews. It was brutal. I actually had someone say, tell me about yourself. And I couldn't, he said, give me your elevator pitch. And I had such a frog in my throat that I had to restart 3 times and still couldn't get the words out. And he goes, well, I got things to do. And I go, oh my God. Right. I'm like sitting in this advertising office in a suit, which I shouldn't have been wearing. And it was just an info interview, but I thought it was a real interview. It was so many things went wrong. And I did all this research on his company, but I never practiced my story, and just one thing after another. But the kind of silver lining on that story is 6 years later, I wrote him an email and I said, thank you so much for the learning experience. That was the subject line. And in the email, it says, you probably don't remember me, but I had the worst informational interview of my life with you. And I just want to say thanks. I learned a lot. And he writes back going, I have no idea who you are. I don't remember that happening. But you must have gotten better at communicating because I opened your email and I never opened strangers' emails. And so we ended up getting coffee for 3.5 hours and talking about advertising. This is what becoming good at telling stories, even if right now you're not very good at it, this is what it can lead to. It can lead to much better connections. And even if it doesn't lead to a job, those connections are helpful. Those moments where you're connecting with someone professionally give you confidence that makes you better in an interview. I was definitely better at interviewing after I confronted that demon from my past, right, than I was before. Because I go, okay, wait a second. People don't remember you. People will forget when you screw up. These are good things to remember because, again, we put these jobs on such high pedestals that they stress us out to the max. So take the companies down a peg. Remember, these are people with their own messy lives and their own messy work and their own procrastination and their own issues. And their probably own, family members yelling at them about stupid things, right? Everyone's got their own thing that is distracting them, that is stressing them out. So if you can be someone who's helpful, who communicates clearly, and who genuinely wants to make their lives easier, you're going to really stand out in the job search. So when you're doing an informational interview, here's a few questions you can ask. What is your favorite project that you're working on today? What problems, sorry, I got my wires crossed here. These are the questions you should ask yourself for the stories that you're telling. So I'd love for everyone to take a moment right now and think about a project that you recently worked on and ask yourself these questions. So what was the project in class that you enjoyed working on the most? Either shout it out or put it in the chat. Which project stands out, y'all? Building a weather app. Awesome. What problem did you solve with the weather app?
I figured out how to create a 7-day forecast. Yeah.
Cool. And what's
I mean, among other problems, I mean, like I figured out how to convert from Celsius to Fahrenheit and make that persistent. And to have dynamic images that correspond to weather conditions.
cool. And what skills did you use to make that happen?
Knowledge of how APIs function. It was primarily a JavaScript project, so I needed to use my new knowledge of JavaScript to create the functionality, as well as HTML, CSS.
And then what outcomes did you get from it?
Very like a nice looking app that functioned the way I wanted it to, but that I could continue to build on if I wanted. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the way we might phrase the outcome is a little bit more on the user. So I built something that users could come to and do X, Y, and Z, right? So this setup can also be helpful in your resume bullets. So resume bullets, I just put a quick like outline template of what your resume bullets could look like. I did this thing using this tech to achieve this outcome. So built a weather app utilizing, did you say Python, right?
JavaScript.
JavaScript, sorry. So built a weather app using JavaScript to enable users to see 7-day forecasts or whatever the thing might be, or to plan their day around the weather, whatever it is. So that's how we can start to phrase these stories really, really simply. I'm trying to give you the simplest ways to talk about things so that you can then expand upon it, right? If we start with something that's a sentence long, we can then elaborate. But if we start with a 7-paragraph story, it's going to be pretty hard to get that, point across in an interview, right? So thanks so much for sharing your story there. And this brings us to the pitch. So when it comes to the pitch, it gets pretty nerve-wracking, right? Who here feels really confident about your elevator pitch? Not seeing.
I actually
Go
had a
ahead.
story. Actually, not a story. A question about the stories.
Yeah.
Um, do you have like a list or a few that we should keep in mind that we should definitely practice before going into an interview? Because it seems like we should have a different story for different things that they ask us.
You're talking about interview questions, stories for interview questions?
Or not, yeah, interview questions or just telling a story in general that can be useful in an interview?
Yes. So that's a great question. The wonderful thing about telling stories in response to interview questions is that number one, it's specific, but number two, it covers a lot of questions. So each story that we tell likely has positive attributes, positive things to call out, and negative things to call out. So let's say someone asks a question about a time that you showed leadership. I can talk about the time where I was brought onto a team to be a manager for the first time. And I helped run this um, high-end coaching program that they offer to their students. So I can tell the leadership story there. I can say, I was a contractor. We had someone going on maternity leave. I had a lot going on, but they really needed the support. And so I stepped away from a few contracts. I took over this project, and I actually had to learn how to manage on the fly in this role. I could also tell that same story tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker, right? Well, in that story that I was just telling you a little earlier about the time where I took that management role, there was one person on the team who I didn't actually get along with very well. They had been put on a performance improvement plan, and they had been struggling with, management in general. And so when I joined the team, I had these experiences with them. Here was my approach to solving them. Here was our resolution, and here's what I learned, right? And I can break that same story down from a different perspective. Tell me about a time that you're really proud of your work. Well, I can talk about the results of that big project that we were working on. So in this same story where I showed leadership and had conflicts, what we ended up accomplishing with the project, I think was really cool, which was creating great customer experiences in this really high-end coaching product. And here were some of the student experiences that I'm most proud of, right? So you really only need like 5 or 6 stories to answer the majority of interview questions. And what's helpful with that is if you've actually written out the whole story, it could be very long. Some stories could take pages. But if you have the stories in your head, you don't have to prepare for every interview question because you can start to think like a politician a little bit. A politician doesn't sit there and say, oh no, I wonder what questions I'm going to be asked, right? They sit there and go, I don't care what questions I get asked. Here's the stories that I'm telling tonight. And they fit the stories to the questions, right? Now, don't be ridiculous with it. You don't want to be one of those politicians that gets asked a question and then just starts talking about something completely unrelated. And you're like, wow, way to be a D. But you don't want to be so constricted that you think you have to come up with some brilliant new answer for every single question. You can build on the things you've already mentioned in the interview. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. And so, yeah, and the nice thing is that most people who are interviewing you are not very well prepared and not trained in interviewing. Yet another thing where you should lower your expectations of how professional interviewers are. They will likely be Googling good interview questions to ask, which means you have access to the same lists that they are going to be referencing during the interview. So use Google to your advantage. It's there to help. Any other questions on stories before we move on to the pitch? You got it. Pitch it is. So your pitch is just a simplified version of the stories that you want to communicate to employers. So it's not easy because it's not easy to be concise. I mean, you've got 2 hours with me. I'm like rambling my brain off, right? So it's hard to be concise, and it's really difficult to get a point across in a few words. But the more you practice this stuff, the better you'll get. So in this section, I'm going to be giving you a template. We're going to be, writing up our pitches. But I just want you to know that it's not about writing a perfect pitch, memorizing it, and then saying it the exact same way every time. I have about 3 or 4 different ways that I pitch myself and introduce myself, depending on how I'm feeling that day, Like it's not even necessarily based on anything. Like today I wanted to hit on the marketing thing, but sometimes I hit on the emotional thing more. Sometimes I hit on the promotional thing a little more. Sometimes I hit on the boot camp thing a little more. It really depends on who I'm talking to and what I want to talk about that day. So we're not trying to get a perfect pitch. We're trying to get a good starting point for your pitch. All right. And that's what we're working towards here. So how do you organize your pitch? This is my favorite way to answer the question, tell me about yourself. All right. So typically when people answer the question, tell me about yourself, which is the first question you're going to be asked in every single interview, people will say, I went to school here, I did work in this, and then I did this kind of work, and then I did that kind of work, and now I'm doing this kind of work because that didn't really work out for me. And now I'm looking for a job in this role. Right? Just very straightforward, not very inspiring, just kind of is what it is. I like to change it up just slightly here. And instead of going past, present, future, which is what I just laid out for you, switch it to present, past, future. And what I mean by that is instead of saying, here's where I came from and now I'm doing this, we want to say, I'm doing this currently and I got here through this path. So I'm currently a software developer. I'm currently a data scientist. I'm currently a career coach. I'm currently. So I'm currently this thing, and I got here through my background doing X, Y, and Z. While doing that work, I realized that I really enjoyed the technical side of things. So I moved into data science, and now we're in the future. And that's why I'm so excited to learn more about this role and see where I can bring value to your team, right? So I'm currently a data scientist helping companies understand the insane amounts of data that they're collecting on their consumers and utilize it in creative ways. I got to this point through my background in chemistry and technical roles, etc. And I'm really excited to learn more about what you're looking to do on your data science team and see where I can bring value to this role. Alejandro, that's for you. So that's how you can set up these elevator pitches, and you can riff off them too, right? You've got the organization, now you can riff. Oh, what parts of my past do I really want to hit on? How do I want to, highlight what I'm doing today? What problems do I want to talk about solving for this person or this company? I'm a career coach that's focused on outcomes, but I'm also a career coach that's focused on workshops. And I'm also a career coach focused on resumes. And I'm also a career coach focused on personal brands. So depending on who I'm talking to and where the conversation is at, I can be broad, I can be specific, I can do all sorts of different things. Does anyone want to give this a try? I know it's nerve-wracking, and I know this is going up on YouTube, but I guarantee you not many people will see it. So don't worry too much. Pat, I'm seeing you laughing. I got to call you. I got to bring you on.
Yeah, well, I was gonna go if no one else is gonna pop up. Hi, so my name is Patrick. Right now I'm a software engineer. I've just completed a coding boot camp and I'm working on a lot of projects based around software engineering. I got to this point because I wanted to learn more about the life cycle of software engineering to be able to manage teams of software developers. But once I got started doing the actual coding, I realized that that's the thing that got me excited about the career path that I started as an IT analyst, and then as a team lead, and kind of got away from being able to solve all the problems. So now I'm hopeful to use the things that I've learned to solve software problems or help companies solve issues that they're having with their software and apply creative solutions and help build up teams around me.
Bravo. Everyone give him a round of applause with your mics muted, I guess. Dude, that was great. I know it felt choppy, but I put you on the spot. How did you feel about it?
No, I felt good about that. Yeah, and we had done one with kind of a similar thing with a previous presenter, but as like that was like in week 2,
Cool.
and it's kind of crystallized to me in the last like week or so as or the last couple of days we've been building kind of our final capstone project. Like really, like I thought, like, all right, I'm going to come to this program. Maybe I'll like the software engineering, but at least that there's like, I'll have an understanding of how it all works, to then be able to be like a customer support person. That was what I was doing in my past role, but just like with an understanding of software development.
Yeah.
But now I'm liking actually doing the building of stuff, and wanted us to do that instead. So
Awesome. Love that.
yeah.
The key thing that resonated with me when you gave your pitch there, apologies for the phone, it will be very loud for a second. The thing that really stood out to me was how you said, I am a software engineer, and you said it very strongly, right? You didn't go, oh, I'm learning, or I'm just graduating. You didn't undercut it at all. You just said it. And then you said, and I'm studying these things, right? And that confidence right in the first sentence really makes a difference in an interview. All right. Just a second. We got okay, it hung up. Gotta love phones. And so when I'm talking to folks, I want them to get more and more comfortable owning that they are the thing already. All right. So it's hard to do. It's hard to do because we don't feel like it yet. Right. But the truth is that a company is probably not going to trust you to do a job and pay you what you want to be paid if you don't believe you're the thing yet. So it would be really hard pressed for me to say to you, I'm an aspiring career coach. Pay me $350 to do something for you, right? I'm an aspiring career coach. Pay me to rewrite your resume. That doesn't really feel good. You're not going to be like, oh, yay, I hope this guy learns what he's doing while working on my resume, you know? If you're going to ask this company to pay you 50, 60, 70, 80K, you got to be confident enough to say, I am the thing that I want you to pay me for, right? So that's the thing I'm going to need you all to practice beyond this presentation, is like practice saying you're, a software engineer or a data scientist. Like really practice it. Say it out loud. Hell, it's probably something I need to say more often to be more confident, right? But these are all things that help us get past this like shuffling our feet in an interview. They don't want someone to come in and be unsure of if they should be there. They want someone to come in and say, look, I don't have all the skills, but I can get up to speed on pretty much anything if I have this much time to do it. What are you trying to do? What am I already capable of doing? What do I need to get started working on outside of work? And how can I help solve these problems, right? So when I was in marketing, I didn't know everything about every kind of marketing. It's impossible. There's too many things to know. But I do know enough about the theory that I can talk to you about how we could get that thing rolling. Or hell, if it's really outside of my wheelhouse, how we can pull someone else in to help, you know? And that's what I want you to be thinking about. It's not about being perfect. It's about instilling confidence in the other person, building trust, and building rapport. All right. And this is really helpful because you might hit a point where you really don't have the answer, where you really are going to say, I don't know. And what we want to say at those moments is, I don't know. However, I've gotten up to speed on things similar to this pretty quickly. If you give me 3 to 6 weeks, I'd be ready to go on this new technology, and we'll be off to the races. How are you using this on your team? And that's how we connect the dots. We understand where we are. We understand how we got here. If you think about every job that you've had as sort of a stepping stone to where you are today, and then looking backwards and making all the connections, it's a little bit of revisionist history, maybe. Maybe there's some times where you're just flying by the seat of your pants and you just were making decisions, but that's okay. Connect as many of the dots as you can. All right. On my journey to being a career coach, I was a residential advisor in college, helping people get internships. I was a marketing person, an email marketing person. I went into advertising. I was an entrepreneur for a bit. I joined a consultancy. I skip over that one usually. It didn't go so well. And you just look back and you say, which dots connect the best for this story? And just like, how they write a movie, they're not going to tell you, you never see someone go to the bathroom in the TV show 24. That's the joke, right? How do they have 24 hours and we see every hour of the day, but no one ever stops to go to the bathroom? Like that goes like a Mad TV sketch back in the day. Because it's not part of the story, right? The key parts of the story are I did this and I learned this. Then I did this and I learned this. Then I did this and I learned this, and now I'm here. And I can't wait to see how I can do this for you and get these outcomes and learn what kinds of impacts we can have. So I'm beating a dead horse here, but I really just want to make it clear. So here's how you write it. Merging a background in my previous job with my current focus, I help companies solve these problems and get these outcomes. This is how I typically will write people's summaries for their resume and for their LinkedIn. And sometimes you can even use this for your elevator pitch, although I much prefer the past, present, future. Present, past, future. Getting my own things wrong. Merging a background in blank and blank, I help companies do this and get these outcomes. Everyone take 5 or so minutes to write this up for yourself and put it in the chat, and then we'll talk about it. So for example, merging a background in customer service and web development, I help companies create amazing experiences for their users across the web. It looks like this. It ends like this. Now these aren't perfect, so don't feel like you have to be like shackled to the template, right? Like the ending of this one isn't exactly the ending of this one, but it's close enough. Creating amazing user experiences. Which slide do you want to see, the example slide or the template slide? I'll leave the template up.
And these roles include the roles that we're applying to, right?
Yes. So merging, and you could have 3, so merging a background in customer experience, in customer service and web development. So that's the current thing is the second one. And the previous one is the first one. So for me, it's merging a background in marketing and education and career development. I help education organizations improve student outcomes through career coaching. That's my pitch. But that's for talking to schools. For talking to individuals, it would be different, right? Merging a background in marketing and career coaching, I help you reverse engineer behavioral marketing strategies to make more money, so on and so forth, or to land new jobs or whatever I want to say. So these are the things to be, so sorry, my long answer, but the short answer is yes, it's your current focus is the second point. All right, I'm seeing it in the chat already. Keep them coming. All right, I'm loving these. So we've got merging a background in marketing and data science. I help businesses come up with the best strategies to market their products to consumers. Perfect. Now, the second half of that is focused on marketing. So maybe we want to shift that a little more to the technical side, where we say, I help businesses build technologies that improve their ability to market products to consumers, something like that, if you really want to hone in on the building technologies piece, but that's up to you. Next one here, combining my backgrounds in web development, customer support, team management. I help companies develop teams that are friendly and dynamic that drive a great experience for the users. Cool. I help
Yeah, it's
companies.
still a little clunky. I'm working
Yeah,
on the
but
grammar. It's a little, yeah.
And then the question is, are you applying to roles where you're going to be developing teams, or are you applying to roles where
No.
you're developing teams?
Not right now. Not as a team leader. No, I'm looking at just developer roles.
Cool. So then we can even make it easier, right? I help companies build dynamic user experiences, or build dynamic experiences for their users online. And the team stuff can be inferred or talked about in the interview, which is perfect.
Okay.
All right. Anyone struggling with yours? Need more time? Go ahead.
So I don't have like a background in this like at all. So how do
What
I
is
like
your background?
healthcare management?
What was it?
Healthcare management.
Okay. So you can still put that in here. The background doesn't have to relate. Like marketing isn't technically related to career coaching. It's about weaving that story together, right? Customer service isn't technically related to web development, but if you pull in the best traits or the things that you enjoyed about customer service and you talk about it in a web development context, here's how it connects. So let's say it was customer service and web development. Well, every web developer is going to have to deal with clients and communicate with teams. So merging a background in customer service and web development, I help businesses communicate better with their clients and build software that's more intuitive, right? So for you, what was the thing about healthcare management that you were good at or that you enjoyed doing?
Well, so I just like graduated and then I didn't get like a job or whatever. So now I'm just like learning this, like just to.
That's cool. So what about your studies? What did you study in healthcare management that you enjoyed?
I don't know, like administrative work.
Okay. So you're pretty good at putting together or at organizing different work,
Yeah.
right? So so when it comes to organization, that's a skill, right? So are you looking for a job in what, web development, or what are you looking for a job in?
Yeah, I'm still really iffy about what I want to do, but
Okay,
we
fair
can
enough.
well, we can like, yeah.
Well, that'll make this exercise difficult, but no worries. Like I'm not here to like put you under a microscope. I'm just here to give you the resources you need when you're ready for them, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm someone who runs their own, contract business. So every day there's someone telling me that I should be doing X, Y, or Z for my business, right? I should be on TikTok, or I should be doing click funnels, or I don't know what the hell. Someone's always telling me something. I just know the tools are there when I'm ready for them. That's what we're doing here. So when you're ready to say, here's what I want to do, then you just
Mhm.
plug it into this formula and you're good to go.
Okay.
But definitely hold on to that organizational piece, because you're different. When they say, what are your strengths and weaknesses? You can say, well, I was in healthcare management. So I really learned how to get into the details and organize things. And that's something I'm really strong at. So when I'm on a team building a website, I'm going to be the person that keeps everything incredibly organized as we go. That's a perfectly solid answer. Any other questions before we move on? Ooh, we got another one. Merging a background in analytical chemistry, teaching, and data science, I help companies make decisions using predictive data trends to increase client revenue. Perfect. I'm gonna actually steal some of these. These are really good. Whoa, trying to highlight the chat, and that is not as easy as it seems. All right. So when it comes to writing your pitch, which we just did the share out. Now, how do you use it in your job search, right? That's the big question. So typically what I would say is you can use this thing that we just wrote in your about section on LinkedIn, or your summary section on LinkedIn, in your summary section on your resume, because you'll notice like everyone has these really long paragraphs written at the top of their resume and these really long paragraphs written at the top of their LinkedIn that no one will actually read, because everyone skims, right? So if I'm skimming a page and it says hard worker, immediately I don't want to read that paragraph, right? Because every single person who doesn't know what to say in their resume will put hard worker at the top of their resume, or problem solver. I want to know what problems, right? So that's why we say, merging my background with my current focus, I do these things. So you can put it in your LinkedIn, you can put it in your resume, you can even use it to answer the question, tell me about yourself. So someone says, hey, tell me about yourself. Well, merging a background in analytical chemistry, teaching, and data science, I'm currently focused on helping companies make decisions using predictive data trends to increase client revenue. And I'm really curious to learn more about this role and see how I can bring value to the team. Now that's a little bit too tight, right? It feels a little bit too scripted, but if you have that, in your head, if you have that story on autopilot, you can riff on it. And that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to give you the easiest thing to then expand upon. All right, and so we'll just open up the rest of the time here. I'd love to hear what questions you have in regards to all these different pieces, or in the job search in general. I know we went over a lot today. Is there anything in the list of what we just went through that is a little bit maybe confusing or overwhelming?
It seems like the better career, or the better path to get a job interview would be through referrals. If you do not have that many connections from this industry, coming in from a different industry, how do you increase those connections to get those referrals so you have a better chance at those interviews, even if you don't know anybody essentially in the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a couple of things to talk about with this. So the first thing is you just kind of have to start building it. So if you want to be working in an industry the best thing you can do is surround yourself with people that work in that industry, right? Probably, again, I should take my own advice with coaches, but the key thing here is, like, let's say you want to be an actor. If you're just in Minnesota and you're not in an acting class, you're gonna have a pretty hard time becoming an actor, right? You might want to get to LA or New York, or at least join an acting class to meet other actors. Now, you've all taken the first step here. You at least know each other. You at least know the people in your class. You at least have the alumni network to draw on. Start there. Start by building that world, getting more involved, volunteering for alumni events, doing projects with people in your class, being active on any boards or Slack channels or Discords, setting up one-on-ones with previous graduates and learning from them. That's the easiest way to start surrounding yourself with the right people. You know, there's that age-old phrase, which is you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so if you're not spending any time with people who work in your field, then you're not going to be getting those opportunities that are naturally going to start popping up. So start with the, Coding Temple network, and then move on from there. When you meet people, say, who would you recommend I reach out to? Then reach out to those people. And the best thing you can do to build your career is go to LinkedIn, go to the people search. So you go to the search bar, you hit enter, and it'll bring you to the search page where you can click people as an option, and you can put in filters. And this is recorded, so you can always come back and watch it, or you can look up reverse job search, Martin McGovern, and it'll come up of how to do this. But basically you can reverse engineer the search filters so that you can find everyone who has the job you wish you had. And so if, I'll show you really quick. I think we have some time here. So do we have time, or are we out? Oh, we have a
Yeah,
little.
but you would recommend talking to just going up to random people and trying to add them to
Exactly.
get those referrals, right?
So not just add them, but here, I'll walk you through what it looks like. So we're on LinkedIn here. You go to the search bar. Whoops. Oh, you're seeing my calendar. So we're on LinkedIn here. You go to the search bar. You just hit enter. It brings you to the search page. You can see people, posts, jobs, companies, groups, schools, events, courses, all. Click on people. Then go to all filters. Now, you're not going to worry about the connections because you're open to meeting anyone. What you want to do is go all the way to the bottom. What title? What is the job title you wish you had?
You can put data scientist, for example.
Okay. So I'm just going to show you the biggest group of search results. So 148,000 data scientists. All right. So then you go to all filters and you can narrow it down by location if you want. Or what I like to narrow it down by is industry. Do you have any industries that you find most fascinating? You can look up LinkedIn. Can you see my screen here? LinkedIn industry.
IT consulting.
All right, so let's do that. So add industry. Oh, it's right there. Information technology, and then consulting, management consulting. All right. That brings us down to 41,000 results. All right, still a lot of results. So maybe we put in the location. Where are you located?
Washington, D.C.
All right. Now we're down to 1,200 results. So you've got a lot of people that you can reach out to, right? So Booz Allen Hamilton, Mantech, Datacoo.
I know Jamila.
There you go. Deloitte.
Yep. Would you recommend just messaging all these people and hopefully getting one of those to reply, or
Yep.
how would you approach this?
So typically I'll email. So I'll look up Clearbit Connect, which allows you to find anyone's email address. It looks like this. With the slow loading. There you go. You install it and it shows up in your Gmail. It's a little hard to find when it installs, but it's there on the top right side. And basically you can find anyone's email address. So if I go to my Gmail, it's over on the right-hand side here. All right, I have to log back in, but that's all good. So basically what you can do is you type in their company name and then you look up their name. And if they show up in the results, you have their email, boom. If they don't show up, it usually shows their coworkers and you can guess their email from the other people's emails. So if everyone else is first name dot last name, you can assume this person's first name dot last name. Worst case scenario, it bounces back. You try something else. I typically say try and reach out to them via email because everyone checks email, but not everyone checks LinkedIn. But LinkedIn is a fine backup if you really can't get a hold of them via email. And when you reach out to them, the goal is to, again, make it about them. All right. So if you make it about you and you say, my name is, here's my resume, I want a job, people won't respond, right? That's kind of like in a dating app saying, hey, I want to get married before saying, do you want to meet for coffee, right? Too soon. So what we want to do instead is say, hey, you look like you do interesting work. I was researching your industry. I'd be so curious to learn more about what you do. Would you be up for a virtual coffee chat? And they'll be like, sure, why not? And some people won't, some people will. We only really care about the people that will. And anyone who doesn't want to meet with us isn't going to be helpful anyway. So good riddance, right? And so once you get that meeting, that's where we get into this storytelling stuff. That's where we ask good questions, talk about ourselves in a productive way, learn, research, use it as a research opportunity, as well as a way to just, meet people in the industry, potentially get referrals. But if you're not going to be open-minded enough to learn about a person without the expectation of them giving you a job, it's going to be pretty hard to get someone to give you a job because they're going to see through the fact that you don't actually want to be there. And so that's the tough part with networking is like, well, for me, I was such an anxious person that I was just reading from a script the whole time for like the first year or two that I networked. And honestly, if you're just kind about it, I would just say like, hey, I get pretty nervous about these conversations. I want to make sure I'm using your time wisely. I wrote down some questions. I hope that's okay. And the presupposition is that if you're meeting in a professional context or coffee, there is the assumption that you might help each other with your careers someday. You don't have to blatantly state it. It's kind of assumed. Just like if you're on a date with someone, you don't have to be blunt about what you're hoping to get from the date. It's kind of assumed that you both want a relationship or whatever arrangement you're looking for, right? I mean, eventually you got to talk about it at some point, but it doesn't have to be in the first sentence or in the first email. We have to build trust and rapport before we can make the ask. And so that's really what we want to be doing in these conversations. And when we reach out to people, we want to say, I was doing research on the IT industry. Your name came up. It looks like you're doing some really interesting work. Would love to learn more about what you're doing over a virtual coffee chat. Would you be up to it? And the people that are into it are into it. And the people that aren't. And it's pretty straightforward. It's not easy to do and it's going to be awkward, but every awkward conversation with a networking contact is going to make you stronger for the interview. And so you get like you get so many benefits from it. You get interview practice, you get research about your industry and about that company, and you get potential referrals. And the key thing to think about with referrals is at the end of the interview, informational interview, ask them this question. Say, if a job opens up in the future, would you be willing to pass along my resume? Because it's a future ask, people are more likely to say yes. Then if you said like, hey, can you put in my resume today? Like that's a lot. You know, I already met with you for coffee, chill. So we set the stage for a future conversation. And then what I typically will do is go put reminders on their job boards. So go to the company page, put a job alert on that company. So I'm the first person to know about the job alert. And then I already have a contact there, and I'm the first one on the list when they start interviewing. Places have referral bonuses. Yes, huge incentives. They all have incentives to do that. So that was a long-winded
Yeah,
answer.
but if they refer someone that they don't know and they end up doing a bad job, wouldn't it reflect back to them as well?
Yes, which is why you need to build rapport, right? If you have, like, people only really need to have 1 or 2 good conversations to feel comfortable referring someone. But if we say, hi, I want a job at your company, and they've never talked to us before, guaranteed they're not going to be passing your name along because everyone's scared. That's why they do 7 to 12 interviews throughout the process of getting a job, right? Because everyone is scared of looking stupid in front of their boss. So you have to help them feel comfortable advocating for you. And the key thing there is to try and build rapport. I look for culture fit before I refer. Yeah, and culture fit is really just, do I get along with this person? You know, my favorite thing is meeting someone who used to work at a company. This is actually a little bit of a trick. If you want to reach out to people who used to work at a company, you'll get all the dirt on the company. I actually met with someone who had gotten fired from the role that I was interviewing for, and she gave me so many great insights into what that team was going to be like. I still ended up working with the company, but I knew what I was getting myself into, so it was less painful. We still have a few minutes. If there's more questions, happy to dig into any aspects of the job search that are on your minds.
Martin, my name is Halim, and I have a question. I want to know what exposure you've had with assisting students who are leaving a coding boot camp and who are trying to prepare themselves for the application process and then securing a role. Could you maybe talk about, and seeing your past experience as a data sample of how those students have succeeded, what do they do to close their education gap? What did they seek to, what do they do for seeking professional mentorship, which we kind of already talked about with like networking. I think what's giving me a lot of mental instability is the skills I've learned and what I see on the job ads, they're not exactly translating, or they're not exactly matching. It's a lot of exclamation point, equal sign.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
so that,
the first thing I'll say is to put less trust in job board listings. So I've written job board listings, and I know a lot of people that work in HR and recruiting, and they write job board listings. They're much more subjective than we think they are, and much more flexible than we think they are. Typically, you only need about 60% of what is listed there because the company is putting together their ideal candidate. They want someone who can literally run the entire business, top down, front and back, backwards and forwards, for $2 an hour, right? That would be their ideal person. So they can go sit on a beach and not have to do anything, right? But they're not going to find that person. If they found someone that fit all the criteria of the job listing, they would not be able to afford that person's work. So we have to realize that job boards are marketing boards. They are billboards. And if you read a billboard that says, Diet Coke helps you lose weight, you can be somewhat skeptical, right? I'm sure there's plenty of things. I'm sure there's some truth somewhere in there that they're pulling from, but I need to go get more information. And so put less weight into what the job board said. Basically, the way I look at job boards is, does it have the title that I'm looking for? And is it in the industry that I want to work personally? So is it career coach in the education industry? Then I apply. I don't even look beyond that. I don't do any research until I have submitted my application. I do a basic amount of research if they need a cover letter or something like that, but I have a template for that too. So the things that you want to be focused on are attacking it from the job board. So you get your application in, you're in the system, but then reaching out to people that work at the company and trying to build relationships so that you can have someone go, oh, I really enjoyed that conversation. Of course, I'll pass along your resume.
So you mentioned,
Go ahead.
sorry, you mentioned 60% a number earlier, about 60% of the job listing you should be able to, I believe you
Yeah, if you
mentioned
had,
that.
that's the general rule of thumb. If you have about 60% of what's in that job listing, you should apply.
So would you say they would, you're more likely to get hired by fitting in the culture and knowing that 60%, or knowing more about the role and fitting more those skills that they want, but being less, um, getting along less with the people there and not
They
networking as much.
They will likely go with the person that fits better but has less skills than the person who has all the skills but doesn't get along with anyone on the team. Because businesses know that if you are a pain to work with, then people aren't gonna. It's gonna end up like you can't do the whole job yourself. So that being said, you don't have to be a perfect culture fit. You just have to be really curious and helpful. I always say curious excitement beats perfect fit, because you just need to be interested in helping the company, because they need to know that you're not going to just take the money and go home, right? They're worried about people using and abusing the company, which is fine. That's what companies need to worry about. And then we need to worry about companies using and abusing us, right? That's the kind of tension. So job boards typically have like a 3 to 4% response rate. And that's not all yeses. That's just responses. And 80% of jobs never make it to the job board, because if you think of how companies hire, if you have more than 100 employees, why would you need a job board? You would just say, who in the company can do this? And maybe you'll find someone. And if you don't, you'll say, hey, who in the company knows someone who can do this? We'll pay you $3,000 if you can refer someone. And of course, they're going to find someone that way, because there's plenty of people who need jobs. And if you have 100 employees, someone knows someone, right? Now, that's not always the case, in which case they post it on the job boards. But every company posts on different job boards. Some jobs are posted and then sent to a resume shop or a job shop, which then posts it anonymously on 100 other boards under like a consultant name. So you might actually apply to the same job 5 times, not even knowing it, and be rejected from all 5, thinking you got rejected from 5 jobs when really it was just 1. This is why job boards are inefficient. They worked maybe when only a few hundred people were on the job board, but now that it's tens of thousands of people, it's just a cluster. So we have to use them to get in the system to see what's out there. I look at a job listing as a red flag saying, hey, we need help. We need help. We think we need help with this. Can you come talk to us? And the number of people that I've seen go in for an interview and leave with a completely different job opportunity happens all the time. Someone goes in, interviews for a job, then they realize, wait, you're a better fit in this kind of a thing. And then they get a consultant contract or something like that. I actually had someone get, they applied for a software developer job last week. They got a first round interview. They were not qualified. It was a little more senior of a role. And they were told at the end of the interview, you don't have enough experience, or we want someone with more experience. So thank you for coming in. And they followed up and said, I really appreciate that. What specific experience are you looking for? I'd love to, go do some work on my end to learn that stuff and be ready for any future interviews or maybe collaborating in the future. And they said, oh, well, actually this type of stuff. And they wrote back saying, oh, cool. Well, here's what I know about that. And here's what I'm going to go study. Maybe we can work together again in the future. And they went, oh, wow, this person's really proactive. And they ended up bringing him back in for another interview after that, even after they told him they weren't going to. So these are the things that happen when you stop worrying about perception. Are they going to like me? Are they not? And you just start worrying about, can I be helpful? Can I help them? Can I ask more questions? Can I be more helpful? And this is really good if you get turned down for a job. Sometimes I'll say, I'm sorry that we couldn't work together, but if you need any other referrals, I'm happy to open my network. Always leave on a good note, or if I turn a job down, I'll say, I can't, take on that contract right now, but I know 5 or 6 other people who would be happy to if you'd like introductions. So always being the helpful person tends to go pretty far in your job search. All right, we got just a couple minutes left. Any final thoughts, questions, or musings?
I guess one question would be, where are there more opportunities and where are there fewer opportunities? I'm more looking on the data, the data science side. Is there the equivalent of the plumbing jobs that no one wants to do, where it's easier to land compared to the artificial learning or machine, artificial intelligence or machine learning, where, there's 8 people with CS degrees looking for it?
It's a really good question. I think probably the best thing you can do is to focus on medium-sized businesses. And this is maybe not answering your question perfectly, because I know you're trying to say this direction or that direction. I think either direction is fine.
Because I don't want to work for a large company because I did it for a long time.
Yeah.
So
Everyone wants to work at FANG, right? So if you're going the opposite direction, there's plenty of opportunities, right? And there's tons of companies that have no clue what they're doing from a technical standpoint. So if you have the ability to build websites and you don't have a strong portfolio yet, I would go as far as to say volunteer for nonprofits. Reach out to people who have small businesses and just say like, hey, for $300, I'll do your website so that I can use it on my portfolio or whatnot. Data science is a little more tricky. You gotta, get a company that has data to analyze, but that you just kind of work your way up the chain, and realizing that any project you do, even if it's free, is helping your job search. So everyone thinks about the job search as applying to job boards. That's just maybe 10% of the job search. Keeping your skills sharp, huge part of the job search. Building projects that you can show people, huge part of the job search. I had someone who was really struggling to find an entry-level job. So they just did a bunch of volunteer work. And then on their next real interview, they finally had things to talk about. They're like, well, I'm working with this volunteer organization. Here was a client story. Here was a struggle with a coworker. Here was a, time that I showed leadership. Because they took that free quote unquote project, they were able to get the 70K job they wanted because they finally had things to talk about beyond just their projects. They had real people they were interacting with. So just additional things to think about as you're putting all the pieces together. I hope that answered your question.
yes.
All right. Well, you can keep in touch with me if you'd like. I'll share my screen here again. At careertherapy.com. I make new videos and podcasts and all sorts of different stuff all the time that dive into the hidden side of modern work. Basically, all the stories that the positivity hype on the internet is too, I don't know, too brainwashed to talk about. all the tough parts of the job search that I think are fascinating, but no one ever talks about, like money and negotiations and things like that. So, hit me up on LinkedIn anytime if you have questions. And if we didn't get to certain things today that you were hoping to touch on, I'm always available. These 2 hours really spread it out, but it's been really great chatting with you all. Thanks for participating and asking great questions and doing these exercises. And best of luck in your job search. It's been a pleasure. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.